In March it was time again for the annual Dungeoncrawler GameJam. Developers had 9 days to create a dungeon crawler. While they were allowed to prepare, reuse libraries and assets and also use AI, the main game had to be created during this time frame. 167 old-school grid-based dungeon crawlers had been created in total, and I played more than 50 of them. Hello, my name is Kordanor, and in this video I'm going to present you the highlights of all these submissions, starting with the ones which got the best votings from the community. Whereas the community consists of all participating developers. These are then followed by the ones which received special awards from the judge and organizer Zopadan of dungeoncrawlers.org. I will mention a few additional favorites of my own, and lastly I will also mention 2 games which got commercial aspirations. Of course, there will be some overlap, which I will mention accordingly. And without further ado, let's start with a game placed 5th out of 167 games in the community vote. Those Without Names by Rubikow. You are starting as a prisoner waking up in a cell of what turns out to be a weird cult. Of course, you are breaking out, and you are quickly joined by a mage, fighting your way through cultists and more nightmarish creatures to finally end up at a summoning, bringing a dark god into our world, which of course you got to stop. The graphics of this game had been mostly AI created, but they fit together quite well. The game got a nice looking interface, basic character stats and items, and pretty much catches the spirit of what you would expect and wish for when playing an old school dungeon crawler, which is also why this is one of the 2 games which received the Judges Award for Best Dungeon Crawler Vibes. The 4th place in the community vote goes to Void Protocol by Steamknight and Sandysketches. In this game you stayed behind on a spaceship while the rest of the crew went on an expedition on an alien planet, from which they never returned. Now the Void Protocol doesn't allow you to just fly away without knowing what happens to the crew, so your only chance is to land on the alien planet yourself and to find your crew, or what is left of it. And fighting through, in my opinion, a few too many randomized battles against alien creatures, one by one you will discover your teammates, succumbed by the horror of this planet. The game has a nice story and very cool looking hand-drawn visuals, making it an interesting journey. The 3rd place of the community vote went to Library of Endless Souls by David York, which is the 2nd game which got an award by the judge for having the best dungeon crawler vibes. The game got a very interesting setting. You are doomed to work in a magical, hellish library where each book represents a soul who failed in life and is forced to relive that failure over and over. But the entity which forces you to work there lost its grip on you, and you start to jump into these stories, helping those people to succeed their task and break the loop. And doing so, you get more and more insight about your tormentor, finally being able to face this creature and potentially break free yourself. An excellent concept, great mix of combat and light puzzles, and well executed. Also one of my favorites this jam. Spell Tower by YouDoYouBuddy has been voted 2nd place by the community vote. In this game you got to stop a dark ritual which is being done on top of a mysterious tower in the middle of the forest. To reach the tower, you got to fight your way through 3 outdoor areas with different environments, each with 3 separate levels. On your journey, you continuously see the tower at the horizon, getting closer and closer until you are finally there and stop the ritual by winning the final boss fight. The pixel art graphics are nice to look at, the sound is good, and also the combat with its deck building card game mechanics is quite interesting. The game also received an award by the judge for having the best feeling movement. Overall, a well done and polished experience. And the 1st place this year goes to Snake Eyes by Jimb, Esser, Siena, Merlin, Moraff, Rose Evans and Cooper Savage. Besides being 1st place by community vote, it also received the Best Game Award by the judge. And if I had been the judge, I would have made the same decision. In Snake Eyes you play a group of space adventurers, each member with his or her own very diversified abilities, and you got to explore a defunct alien spaceship, which seems to be bigger from the inside than it is from the outside. The pixel art for the spaceship as well as for all the characters and the interface looks great and coherent. On top of that, you got a well-made movement system and a nicely made map, which allows the player to set a path, which will then be followed automatically as kind of a quick travel system. The turn-based combat system of the game is also relatively deep and quite fun, and if you finish the game you get a score which is saved on a global high score table. Uncharted Wonders by Jimb Esser had already been my personal favorite in the last jam, and I think that this year's first place for Snake Eyes is well deserved. But as I mentioned, there is more. Let's move over to games which received special awards by the judge Zopadan, but don't appear in the top 5 of the community vote. First up is Cosmic Encounter by Captain Coda, Selgeron, Usagino, Andrew and Turtlebox, which received the judges award for the best combat system. In this game you actually play as Zopadan, who just couldn't get enough from dungeon crawlers and made a pact with a demon who now wants to turn him into a meatball. The only way out is to fight against iDemons, disgruntled employees and furniture. Yep, furniture. But he is not alone. Just minutes into the game he will get support from Kordanor. Strengthened with Köttbullar, they will get into battle after battle, which is actually the meat of the game. It's a well thought through turn-based combat system with some kind of action points and a top-down perspective, so that you need to think about positioning and how to use your action points the most efficient way, especially if you play on high difficulty settings. While exploration is only a small part of the game, the movement system actually works really well. The game has its own pixel art, including portraits of Zopadan and myself, nice music and quite a few funny texts. Quite a light-hearted game, coming with a very sophisticated combat system, especially as it's top-down, which hardly any jam game manages to pull off in a way that it actually works well. It definitely does so in this game, so give Cosmic Encounter a try if that sounds appealing to you.
Yum.
One of 2 games which received the Judges Award for Best Atmosphere is Netherwhisper by Steampunkprogrammer. In this short game we have been following a weird signal which led us to an old space station we now entered to check for any signs of life or stuff to salvage. We go from room to room, finding more notes from the crew indicating what must have happened here, and we also start to see some weird stuff. Organic matter claiming the spaceship and actually our body. That is, if it is real. We can hear our heart beating faster, which is confirmed checking our pulse indicator, and need to get out of the more dangerous sections of the ship to calm down again, to not die by a heart attack. Just to go back to these areas and find more hints and getting access deeper into the ship. As the game basically lacks any real combat, I would rather describe it as an adventure game, but a very good and atmospheric one. It's just about 15 minutes from start to one of the 3 possible endings, but it's time well spent and it definitely earned this award. The second game which received this award for the best atmosphere is Neptune's Children by Enygmatic, and the background story isn't that different actually. Just that this time it's not a space station we got to investigate, but a ship which sunk to the bottom of the ocean. And that means we are also walking around in underwater gear, fighting with our knife and spear gun against the weird underwater creatures we will encounter. We also have a hydrophone which we can use near corpses to find out what their last thoughts were. While not as polished as Netherwhisper, Neptune's Children does a great job in conveying the atmosphere of an underwater expedition. Next up is a Spotlight Award, which the judge Zopadan gave to Broccoli Pentad by Disastrophism. It's a game made in the GameMaker engine and it's featuring nice and consistent hand-drawn graphics, where the general looks strongly remind me of Blood Witch of 1989, just a bit more cartoony. It features a full inventory system, having items with different stats and lots of dungeon levels filled with weird looking enemies. But I mean, the game is called Broccoli Pentad, so what do you expect? Now the judge Zopadan still awarded more than a dozen additional games with special mentions and honorable mentions, which you can see here on the screen. But I will not go into detail here. Instead, I'd like to mention a few additional games which stood out for me in one way or the other. First one being Gobbies Stole My Ruins by LimeBlossomJams and Dan Miller. This one is a bit more of a puzzle game. While there's combat against some nasty bats and goblins, it's all about trying to find out which problem to tackle at which time, and how to do so, as following different paths will unlock new skills and weapons, which will then allow you to also be able to proceed in other directions. And these directions aren't just corridors. We are in one big level, which also got quite a vertical dimension. So if you're looking for that kind of experience, put into an overall nice package, then check out this game. Usually I'm quite vocal about how much I dislike games made in the RPG Maker engine. These games oftentimes come with a convoluted interface, spammy combat, plus graphics and sounds I'm not a fan of. And while this isn't the only RPG Maker game in this gem I liked, I wanted to highlight Errance by CyberToasty, as it felt like such a well-made package, which appears well thought through and balanced. In this game we need to lift a curse which requires obtaining 3 items, which are held by 3 bosses. Each boss has his own small level we need to explore and puzzle through, which will also grant us new items and shards which we can use to buy new spells. While there is the option to grind, it didn't feel spammy at all, and the combat was overall quite enjoyable. Enemies felt unique, all having their strengths and weaknesses. It's certainly also setting itself apart by its black and white graphics, which are still nice to look at. And it offers a nice soundscape, though it does still come with some RPG Maker stock sounds. Overall, this game really pleasantly surprised me, and I recommend to check it out. The third and last game I wanted to mention here is Praxis Providence Starsea by Zaccarotto, Luke Humphries, and music by Andrew de Koning. In this game, you play a little robot on board of a spaceship filled with humans which are currently in cryosleep for a long journey. You, the robot, are activated by the main computer of the ship, which you just call Mother. Mother tells you that there has been an emergency and you got to help her fixing it. And she grants you additional functions to fight, but also to unfreeze crew members and to talk to them. In the end, you need to make sure that some security measures are overwritten for Mother. But is that really such a good idea? This is quite an immersive game with a great story and texts, and while a length of 20 minutes is certainly adequate for a jam game, in this case it really felt like it was too short and the story was just getting started, which is why I wanted to highlight this game as the one where my wish to continue playing was actually the strongest. And who knows, maybe the developers will continue the story at some point. In any case, go check out this game if this made you interested. Speaking of games being extended, I also want to mention 2 crawlers which found their start in the jam, but which were turned or will be turned into extended commercial games. The first one being Dragon Ruins by Graverobber Foundation, the developer behind Demon Lord Reincarnation and the Geister dungeon crawlers. Dragon Ruins has the aesthetics of very early dungeon crawlers like the first Wizardries and Ultimas, but it simplifies many mechanics. This includes combat, which is now being done automatically, making it an auto-battler dungeon crawler, where your sole focus is to increase your party's strength by fighting to be able to get deeper and deeper into the dungeon, fighting even harder enemies. Like all the jam games mentioned here, you can check out the jam version for free, or you can check out Steam to get an extended version with additional features for €5 or US$. The second one is Cyclopean by Schmidt Workshops, the developer of Islands of the Caliph. This game as well brings you back into the ancient times of computer history, just that this time it looks like we are using a green and black monitor on an Hercules card. The game is about exploring a small dungeon, fighting enemies and finding as many lost kittens as possible before heading for the exit. A rather simple game which was just created within 3 days instead of the 9 which were possible during the jam. Again, you can check out the jam version for free. The Steam version is still in development and it's not yet decided in which ways the game will be expanded. And these have been the highlights of this year's Dungeoncrawler GameJam hosted by dungeoncrawlers.org. All games mentioned can be checked out for free at itch.io. You will find a link to the full list down in the video description. If you want to join the Dungeoncrawler community as a player or as a developer, check out the dungeoncrawlers.org Discord server. And in case you're interested, all the play sessions I had with these games have been recorded and can be found on my Gaming Sessions channel. If you enjoyed this overview, I'd appreciate if you leave a like, and if you're interested in seeing reviews for RPGs, strategy and retro games, or just videos about other retro topics, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. And that's all from me for this time. After a long day of hard work, I will now be on my way to bed. Until next time.